Good morning, everyone. This is the Coordinating Board. Thank you for tuning in to our webinar this morning on the next Higher Education Strategic Plan, 60 by 30 text. We're very happy to have you listen in this morning. We're going to provide a brief overview of the new state plan and then open up for questions and answers. We have a number of staff here from the agency who will be able to respond to questions. And we're also interested in ideas that you may have for strategies that could help implement the plan.
The Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board is in the process of developing the state's next long-term strategic plan for higher education. The success of achieving the goals of this plan is going to rest heavily on collaboration among higher education, public education, and the workforce. We need to work together much more closely than ever before. The current strategic plan for Texas higher education, Closing the Gaps by 2015, is coming to an end this year. It has been a very successful plan for the past 15 years. Accomplishments during Closing the Gaps up to 2014 include the following. First, over 2.6 million students completed a certificate, associate, or bachelor's. Second, Texas public institutions invested $42.8 billion in research and development, supported by federal, state, local, institutional, and private sources. Third, state legislators allocated $3.3 billion in Texas grants to support low-income students in higher education. Fourth, close to 170,000 students graduated with nursing degrees, and nearly 126,000 students graduated with engineering degrees. These are all graduates contributing to high-demand fields that might not have without the initiatives that came out of Closing the Gaps. Now we are looking forward to the next 15 years as we design a plan that establishes a globally competitive workforce in Texas by 2030. In March 2014, the Coordinating Board created the Higher Education Strategic Planning Committee, which is comprised of education and business leaders from across Texas. This committee is collaborating with Coordinating Board staff on the development of the next higher education plan for the state. Since then, the committee has received expert testimony from individuals from across the state, the U.S., and from around the world. The final plan will be presented to the Coordinating Board on July 23rd for adoption. The new draft plan, 60 by 30 text, is firmly founded on the critical need that Texas produces an educated workforce that is able to adapt to change and compete at the highest levels, nationally and internationally. The world's most competitive workforces have younger populations with more education compared to the U.S. and compared to Texas. 60 by 30 text emphasizes all forms of post-high school education, from certificates to associate and bachelor's degrees to graduate and professional education. The plan also highlights the overarching goal that 60% of Generation Texas will have a post-secondary credential or degree by 2030. 60 by 30 text will build on the success of Closing the Gaps. We don't expect work that began with Closing the Gaps to end. We expect those accomplishments will continue and that 60 by 30 text is the beginning of a new series of accomplishments. We anticipate this pattern of building on successes will be true well into the future. The Strategic Planning Committee has developed 4 student-centered goals. The first deals with educational attainment, which is a fraction of the Texas population actually holding a degree or certificate. The second goal deals with degree and certificate completion at Texas colleges and universities. The third goal highlights the need for students to know they have marketable skills. The fourth goal recognizes the need to address student debt. The first and overarching goal is, by 2030, at least 60% of Texans ages 25 to 34 will have a post-secondary credential or degree. This is a big percentage to shoot for because right now only about 38% of Texans in this age group have any kind of post-high school degree or certificate. The best educated societies in the world have already reached 60%, or close to it, in this age group. This includes our northern neighbor and international competitor, Canada. We need to move the level of attainment up dramatically among young Texans. The new plan calls for realistic interim targets and strategies that will get us to our final goal if we stay on course through 2030. Critical to achievement is the focus on, and success in, improving the education level of young Hispanic Texans, who will make up a majority of the students in school between now and 2030. Why is the 60 by 30 goal important? There has been a huge increase in the percentage of jobs that require some form of post-secondary education or training. In 1973, only 28% of all jobs required education beyond a high school diploma. According to the Center on Education and the Workforce at Georgetown University, 65% of all jobs will require post-secondary education by 2018, including 59% of all jobs in Texas. The simple truth is that the 21st century workforce will require more education and more skills, not less, and the competition globally will be tough. These projections are a key reason why the Coordinating Board is pursuing funding for strategies and other higher education initiatives designed to better align higher education with the workforce and boost the production of post-secondary educated workers. The next goal reads, by 2030, at least 550,000 students in that year will complete a certificate, associate, bachelor's, or master's from a Texas public, independent, or for-profit college or university. Data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics make clear that students don't get much of an economic lift from college attendance unless they complete a degree or certificate. We can do better at this than what we're doing now. Under Closing the Gaps, Texas has been able to generate impressive growth in degree and certificate production. We need to continue that record. The plan includes targets for Hispanic Texans earning 285,000 certificates or degrees in 2030. The plan includes other specific targets, and we encourage everyone to read through these carefully. Another important target is to increase the percentage of students who enroll in higher education directly after high school from the current 53% to 65%. The third goal reads, by 2030, all graduates from Texas public institutions of higher education will have completed programs with identified marketable skills. The goal calls for every institution in Texas to articulate how it prepares its students to succeed after completion. All programs develop skills of value in the marketplace. The plan requires institutions to formally identify those skills for each of its programs so that students are aware of and can communicate these skills to future employers. The fourth goal is, by 2030, undergraduate student loan debt will not exceed 60% of first-year wage for graduates of Texas public institutions. We have an opportunity to balance student loan debt and improve how higher education is financed to reduce financial barriers that students and families encounter when pursuing any level of higher education. We think the best way to focus on financial issues is to set the goal of maintaining debt load as measured against student earning power at graduation. Success will require collaboration among elected officials and higher education leaders and will probably require imaginative reinvention of paths for students and methods for teaching and learning. Our 60 by 30 text plan must be bold. If we aren't bold, we will lose ground in having an educated population. If we lose ground, we will lose our competitive edge in the global marketplace. This will affect institutions and their students. Great universities are built by great economies. If we aren't bold, projected personal income will not keep pace with inflation or with the cost of living. The 60 by 30 text plan is bold. It rests on careful assessments of the possible. We have set challenging goals and targets to meet the genuine needs of Texas and Texans by 2030. We need everyone to review the plan and provide comment before it is sent to the coordinating board for approval. We have an online tool for stakeholders called College Town Hall Texas that enables you to participate in the discussion. This interactive website is hosted by the coordinating board and provides an opportunity to share ideas, respond to new initiatives, and join the dialogue on the future of higher education in the state. Stakeholders, including you, legislators, business leaders, faculty, administrators, students, parents, and educators, can help shape future policy as Texas works to become a national and international leader in higher education. Our question and answer session will begin shortly. Thank you.
That concludes our brief overview. Hopefully you're all really intrigued by this point and have questions for us, because we would love to answer any questions that you have. Some of you are asking if we'll be sharing this webinar online at a later date. We will be posting the video at some point, and we're also developing a frequently asked questions document, which your questions today will help us complete that a little bit further, and we'll also be sharing that as well. So at this point, we'd like to open it up to questions. We can start with the first goal, the 60 by 30 goal. You can use your Q&A bar on the right side of your screen, but we believe we also have the capability to identify you by person to ask over the phone if you would like. I see someone has their hand raised. We can try and unmute you individually and let you ask a question if you'd like to do that. We're going to try and unmute Candy Harris. Oh, she didn't call in. Never mind. Okay, so please send us questions on the Q&A then. Who will be responsible? So we have a question. Who will be responsible for submitting the higher education response for each of the goals?
That will be determined at the institution. It is totally up to the institutions. We'd like to hear from everybody, and we will take all the comments that come in and under consideration.
Here's a question. Given that workforce training is part of two-year college's mission, how does this plan include non-credit training that increases a student's educational goals?
Certificates that are awarded through the continuing ed are also included as part of our completion goal. So they are very much included. This is trying to align with the workforce.
Let me add that fits into the marketable skills area as well, and it doesn't mean that everything you do will be counted. The important thing is the student be prepared for the marketplace. So I wouldn't anticipate that everything you would do would count. For example, in terms of developing marketable skills, it's important for some students can gain real skills doing various activities on campus, but they'll need help in terms of how to identify these for themselves and how they will help in the marketplace. But it wouldn't be something that would show up in reports to the coordinating board.
Next question, what will be the impact of this new plan on our current foundation graduation plan?
I don't think I understand what the foundation graduation plans are unless you were talking about the foundation graduation plans from K-12.
Yes.
And as a student graduates with those foundation plans, it will depend on how they, transfer into higher ed and that sort of thing.
I think something that we didn't say is to think about how we approach closing the gaps. We set basic goals and set targets, but we still believe that at the local level that there should be a lot of room for discretion and the ability to make decisions that reflect your own local population. So the way it should reflect it is in terms of how do you get to our overall goals. Would you make some decisions in terms of those foundation plans that might be different if you weren't thinking about the marketable skills, if you weren't thinking about the debt issue. So that's my general response. But this isn't a plan that's intended to determine every move you make. It's to point in a basic direction for the state.
Okay, next question. Will faculty be required to translate student learning outcomes into these marketable skill outcomes from their course?
Okay, number one, when we're talking about marketable skills, it will be a more narrow range than if you were to accumulate all of your learning outcomes from your courses. Marketable skills can, in some cases, be skills they use within the courses to develop those learning outcomes, but this is something that we intend to leave for each institution, each department to determine how they want to identify help students identify their marketable skills and how they want to develop them. There is a relationship, but if one were to accumulate all the learning outcomes, it would essentially be an overwhelming document and not be very helpful to students. But we really would like some guidance on this, and we're from the schools, and we're hoping that at some point we might be able to get a foundation to provide a grant to bring people together from institutions to learn from each other in terms of how best to do this.
Yeah, and learning outcomes tend to focus on the subject matter content of the courses and or the programs that students are in. And the idea behind marketable skills is to look at those things that other skills and knowledge that students pick up in the course of mastering those learning outcomes that may or may not be directly related to the subject matter content.
Okay, the next question is if we can scroll, okay. Victor, I just can't read the full question. My institution, here we go. My institution was fortunate to be involved with the GenTex initiative. The GenTex website provided many resources that we shared with regional ISDs. Will these additional websites provide materials and resources that we can share with our partner ISDs and with other regional ISDs?
Yes. Yeah, we need some help in terms of what would be most useful. We don't want to overwhelm you with information. And the reality is, for this plan to be successful, the institutions and the faculty need to be a leading light in terms of how we accomplish this. So we need your help and suggestions specifically how to do that. Now, let me just emphasize one thing that Ginger mentioned briefly at the beginning. We still think we need some help in terms of key strategies for the plan. You know, a handful of strategies, while we have them, that really will make a difference as we go forward, how to approach this without at the same time being dictatorial in terms of the accomplishment. So any suggestions you have would be helpful. We're going to discuss strategies in detail. Our entire planning committee meeting next week will focus on strategy. So any ideas you have before then would be particularly helpful, but we will be accepting them through the end of May.
Okay, we've got a couple of questions that have to do with marketable skills. One, how will you differentiate between the term marketable skills as used in the strategic plan versus the marketable skills as reported on the CBM OOM? And then also, how will we know and the state know that we are doing a good job with marketable skills?
Well, let me say one thing, is that what's reported in our CBM report is simply when you have identified something as a marketable skills award. It says nothing about marketable skills, and as you know, sometimes it's just the 3 courses that people have put together that they think make sense. But that doesn't really get at the real marketable skills question we're asking. We will know when we have marketable skills when our students are very successful getting jobs, and in all majors. You know, the questions have come primarily at this point from community colleges, and if you look at the CTE programs, those are obviously directed directly to the market, and at universities, people know what engineering does, what marketing does, but we want to make sure that all majors, whether English and philosophy, have marketable skills. And the reality is that even some of the jobs that are clearly majors that are market-oriented are missing some skills that the market has said they want. For example, we continue to hear that engineers don't write as well as is needed in the marketplace. So part of this will be at some point enhancing our ability to interact with industry, and I've thought of it as in terms of having a learning community where industry isn't dictating to the institutions what to do, but institutions, faculty, and industry are working together to figure out how to produce this. But the final analysis is higher education isn't just about jobs, but everybody that enrolls in higher education has a reasonable expectation of getting a good job, and we need to help them do that.
You know, we're also assuming that what we are calling marketable skills, which may be either what are often termed hard skills, or it may also be soft skills as well, but are those things that will help students get jobs. And we're making the assumption that students are actually learning these things already, that as they progress through a program, whether it be in the humanities, liberal arts, or whether it be in a much more workforce-focused program such as accounting, that students are actually learning these hard and soft skills that are complementary to the program learning outcomes that they're mastering through the subject matter. And so what we're really asking institutions to do is to identify in a way those things and make explicit those things that they're already doing.
And help students understand it. Part of it is understanding. I frequently will talk about an art history major. Really, the average art history major is probably going to have well-developed communication skills and critical thinking skills, but they would never think about those as marketable skills unless somebody tells them. Then they also need some help in terms of understanding, you know, the wide range of areas in which, aside from working in museums, where these skills could be used. I just read in a national magazine last night that people were talking about sociology majors actually being valued in the workplace because of their research skills, but there isn't a direct job that really links them to that. And so the sociology major would need to have an understanding that the various industries such as marketing and some others readily hire majors in that field, but the students have to understand that. They need to be able to look there. So this is one group we haven't included in this is the Career Services Office. So it's really getting career services and faculty working together from the time the student gets on campus through the end.
We have had some questions about who the speakers are, and so if we could just take a moment for the primary responders here to identify themselves.
My name is Ginger Gossman, and
what are you?
I am woman. Hear me roar. I'm the Senior Director of Innovation and Policy Development.
That really begs me to say I'm Rex Peebles, I am man, but I won't say that. I'm Rex Peebles, I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Academic Quality and Workforce at the Coordinating Board.
And I'm Susan Brown. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Strategic Planning and Funding at the Coordinating Board.
And I'm David Gardner. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for Academic Planning and Policy at the Coordinating Board.
Okay, now we'll go on to the next question.
Thank you. The next question. Will all Texas colleges and universities be required to submit individual institutional targets for each of the, and this question says 3, but there are actually 4 30 by 60 goals?
And we think there probably will be targets. We will ask institutions to set targets. We're going to determine which targets will need institutions to set individual targets during the implementation phase. We do not think that all of them will be requiring targets. So that's something that's going to be determined during implementation. And we will be talking with institutions while we do that.
Okay. How will schools report this marketable skills data for inclusion in an accountability system?
This is Ginger. So we have begun conversations about how we will follow this goal and the associated targets, but as part of that conversation, we have not talked about reporting this at the student level. We're really thinking about at the institutional level where you are in terms of the process of identifying marketable skills for each of your programs. And also there was an earlier question about how can we tell if we're doing a good job. And we hope that the quality of your process will be part of your development in terms of when you create the process on site, that measuring the quality of it will be part of it. But I think really if you can get feedback from your students in some way or your local employers, your local employer partners, that might be a way to measure quality as well.
Yeah. This is David. Ginger and a couple of others have met with some faculty and administrators in England via phone about some approaches they're taking. We do know about several things going on in Europe. I'm glad to say that when I had the opportunity to meet with presidents and chancellors last week, that several mentioned to me on the side things that they're already beginning to do on those campuses to address marketable skills. So part of this is we think this is really an effort of everyone learning from each other and developing some approaches, and it may differ from campus to campus how that's done. But I'm really been pleased to learn that at least 3 of our universities have specifically begun to address this, one in their QEP. Another has actually had several committees talking about how to do this. So this is something we truly have to really learn from each other and develop. We have discussed possibly bringing in, at least by Skype, some individuals that are doing this on a campus level in England. Not to say that's the way to be done, but I think we have to learn from each other and not invent from scratch unless necessary.
Okay. Next question. I work at a university that accepts many, many transfer students that already come with debt. Will this fact hurt my institution and the reporting of debt in the new plan?
No.
No, the coordinating board will be looking at how a student comes in and where they come in, but this is a statewide goal. So, yes, we're looking at it for individual students, but not necessarily on a very student-by-student basis, hurting your institution or not hurting your institution.
Yeah, I think what would happen is, and again, we need to flesh this out, is I think if it looked like there were a problem on an individual campus, we would alert you. And we, as you know, we can go into great detail. And I think we would, with analysis, and I think we would point out if you had an issue with students coming in with a great deal of debt already. If they're coming from a community college, it's not likely that debt will be high. The debt levels at community colleges, at least for their graduates, is much lower than at universities. This figure that we have is really aggregates across all sectors.
Okay. We have a question about implementation. The question is, remind us when implementation will occur.
Implementation, our board will actually hopefully adopt the plan at the end of July. So we would think this fall we will start the discussion with the institutions about the implementation.
Okay. And I also will mention that there are a lot of materials available that talk about our interim targets and how those are set at points in time through 2030. The next question, how does this goal align with, and this is asking about various groups, Lumina's 2025 goal, Educate Texas's 20 by 2020, which is asking about other initiatives out there.
Yeah, this is David. I was just at Lumina meeting in Chicago at the end of last week, and I should point out that they wanted us there because they've been impressed with what Texas has done for the last 15 years, especially in terms of expanding minority participation and graduation, though we all know we have a lot more to do. The alignment comes from people paying attention to the Georgetown data in terms of the importance of jobs. That's where Lumina developed their goal, and Jeff Stroll from Georgetown was there. You may know that Jeff has actually talked to at our leadership conference. I guess in 2013, he's talked to our planning committee. We have a very close relationship with Georgetown. So I think the alignment comes through paying attention to the good work that's taking place at Georgetown, and also the work that's taking place at Columbia and the Center for Post-Secondary Education and the Economy.
Next question. Is HB 5 included in the overall strategic plan? I think it would be helpful to look at the career pathways to develop the marketable skills needed per career pathway.
I'm almost tempted to ask to repeat the question. HB 5 is not explicitly included in the plan, but certainly the goals for attainment and completion all kind of assume that there will be some alignment between HB 5, particularly the endorsements that come out of HB 5, and then higher education. For example, we explicitly intend to make programs of study a focus for the next several years, and programs of study are designed to not only enhance horizontal transfer among institutions in Texas, but also vertical movement of students from particularly CTE endorsements under House Bill 5 into CTE programs at particularly community colleges and the Texas State Technical College System and the Lamar Institutes.
You know, I think we're all at a disadvantage because while HB 5 is in place, there's still a lot of work to be done by everyone. And so part of this is going forward, we know we're going to have to work closely with the public schools. We're going to have to learn more what the endorsements mean as we go forward, and how that, what the impact is once students enroll in college. And that's going to be a challenge. So there isn't anything explicitly here that addresses that other than the need to continue to work with the public schools in a meaningful kind of way. Now, this may be an area where we need an explicit strategy that addresses something. So if you think that would be helpful and you've got something in mind, we would appreciate a suggestion.
Next question. Institutions cannot control the amount that students borrow while they attend. Will this information be reported by institution?
Okay, we talked with TG recently in a committee they have with enrollment managers, and and actually a Brookings Institute report came out just within the last couple of months that notes what I think is somewhat scary is students typically have no idea about how much debt they have. So it's clear to me that one thing that we do need to do is to develop a more explicit method of clarifying for students the amount of debt they have, that when they get their financial aid packages, how much of it results in debt and how much of it does not. This is a problem that does need to be addressed, and frankly, I don't recall if we've put in a strategy. I think we modified a strategy to reflect that, but I'm getting the thumbs up that we did. But this is really important. Students don't know that, and we need to help them. But part of this, embedded in this, is that this particular goal reflects that right now, what a student may have in debt reflects state appropriations. Directly through the formulas, it reflects tuition and fees. It reflects what's appropriated for need-based aid. It reflects even whether money's there for the capital budgets. That's why one of our strategies at this point is to, following the session, to get a group together and perhaps with other states. Is there some way we can, a model that pulls all those things together in a meaningful way to help the students? Now, one thing that I don't think was explicitly said by Ginger is this goal really is to keep us at the level we are now so that debt will not get any worse, and there's a target which would limit us to the number of students with debt to, I think it was 50, how much, 50%. So we need to work on that, and we think it's a very good talking point with the legislature when we go forward, because this plan is explicitly about student success overall.
Yeah, one little quick add-on to that is, while I agree that you can't explicitly control the amount of debt students have, I think there is some evidence to suggest that we could do a better job of advising students in terms of how much money do they need to borrow for their education. Students tend to borrow the maximum that they can get, and that may not be, they may not need to borrow all of that to cover their education and expenses. And so I think we can do perhaps a better job of advising students and letting them know how much, as David pointed out, how much debt are they actually taking on? Do they really need to take on that amount?
And even potentially, how does that reflect on what career they're pursuing? And one thing we're hoping to accomplish is to keep debt in a range where the student who wants to become a teacher can afford to become a teacher, a student who wants to be a social worker can afford to do that, that everyone doesn't have to become an accountant or an engineer if they go to college so that they can pay for it.
Next question. What part will prior learning assessments play in helping the 60x30 text reach its goal?
Well, I mean, to the extent that prior learning assessment will lead to individuals getting credit for the work that they've done elsewhere under whatever guise that might be, then certainly that could help increase the completion rates, for example.
Yeah. Well, one feedback I just got on a phone call this morning is that we may not have been aggressive enough in developing a strategy that really says that we need to make sure that institutions know that they can be freed up in significant kinds of ways to make the strong education of students not bound by existing practices unless necessary, and that we help free up institutions and faculty to pursue things. The main goal is what students know when they leave and what they've learned through the process. And so prior learning assessments can be very important, but that will be something that the institutions will have to work with. Also, competency-based education can be very important. There's a whole idea of what is the new model or evolving model of higher education. I personally think it will be more than one model, but we need the explicit attention from those people who actually provide the education to develop that, because we still believe that faculty are the individuals that drive a solid education for students, and we can't lose sight of that.
Next question. How are marketable skills related to LEAP Texas? And LEAP is an AACU program, Liberal Education and America's Promise. Many of the goals of LEAP Texas core curriculum support development of marketable skills.
When the core curriculum was revised, LEAP was certainly borrowed from heavily in developing the core objectives. And so the core objectives are aimed at least a minimal level of proficiency in those areas of things like communications and critical thinking and teamwork and empirical quantitative skills, but also social and personal responsibility. And so certainly there's some relationship between those. I think that and this is something that I've just begun to think about in the last few days about the connections between the core objectives and the core and marketable skills. Those would certainly be marketable skills in terms of soft skills that students could sell to an employer, so to speak. But I think it's also important to note that the core curriculum is designed at a fairly minimal level of proficiency in those things. And it may be that what programs do through the major that goes beyond the core curriculum is enhance those things and build on them. And depending upon the major, they may or may not do a lot more with communications, for example, or a lot more with teamwork, or they may not. So I think that those things can be complementary to each other, and certainly one could argue, particularly at the associate's level, that if you completed the core curriculum that you have mastered at least some marketable skills. But at the same time, we would also ask institutions to look at those things that they are teaching students and that students are learning in the course of programs that go beyond the core objectives of the course.
Awesome. Next question. Can you tell us some more about how the numbers in these goals were identified? Is there any concern the coordinating board has about campus capacity to meet these goals?
This is Susan. The numbers were developed using some methodology that is actually provided on the website, or will be soon. We can send it out. We have individual sheets that talk about each of the targets and how we got to those numbers at a statewide basis. Because there's going to be many different avenues for reaching these goals, for completion, and the debt service and the debt that students carry and the marketable skills, that the completion really gets to the size of the facilities. As online grows, competency-based, a lot of other things, there will be a large variation of how that is achieved. So we don't really have any major concerns as we move forward.
Next question. I represent the Council on Higher Ed Solutions for Adults, and we provide prior learning assessments and educational testing for students pursuing certificates and degrees in higher education. How can we partner with the CB?
I believe that any type of prior learning assessment will be up to individual institutions. The coordinating board will not probably be in a position to dictate or make suggestions to those institutions about how they do each of those things.
Okay. Next question. Currently, THECB provides funding to some colleges and universities to hire college students for the work-study mentorship program to promote higher education at high schools and in the community. Is there a plan to continue these initiatives? And Kramer will answer
This is Kristen Kramer, and this is mostly contingent, of course, upon actions taken during session for allocations, but assuming that there would be continuing to be funding for work study, we typically allocate internally a certain portion to the work study mentorship. So, yes.
And we have asked for additional funding for Advice Texas. So, as Kristen said, this is in the hands of the legislature at this point.
Next question. Will the request for marketable skills apply to graduate-level training?
Yes, we have. You may notice that under closing the gaps, it included certificates, associate degrees, bachelor's degrees, and under the new plan going forward, we plan to include certificates, associates, bachelor's, and master's degrees, since the master's degree has often become a point of entry for the job market. So the short answer to that is yes, and this is one of those things that we'll work with institutions to work out how that will be implemented and done.
Next question. Will there be a move towards performance-based funding, funding based on jobs attained by graduates instead of funding based on student numbers only, such as the TSTC system has undertaken?
Yeah, this is David. As I mentioned earlier, one of our key strategies for the debt goal is to bring together a group, and including hopefully some people from other states, to say, is there a funding model that takes into account not just what the current formula systems do in every state, but also encompasses the whole notion of how to help pay for students with need, how to include capital budgets. There's a whole series of things which are in separate pots now. So the board continues to support performance funding, but we don't know where this particular strategy will lead us. But at the very least, we hope it will better inform formula funding, but we think we need to step out of the box. Formula funding overall was developed in the 1950s, and from what I understand, it was actually developed by Texas originally, and we think is there some way to go forward and look at this as a more complete approach to funding higher education, because right now it's broken in different pots, and sometimes when you help one, you hurt another.
Next question. Will there be an attempt to segment the loan debt that transfer students bring to an institution, or will all debt count against the school from which the student graduates?
You know, we think it's important to look at debt overall. We don't have any intent to, as I mentioned earlier, to beat up institutions over debt, but if something evolves through the data that looks to be some issues, we will provide that information to the school. And I don't think any institution is deliberately adding debt, but some of this fits in with some of the things we've talked about for years. One reason students have debt is they're taking 30 hours more than they need for their degree or certificate. Right now, the average person receiving an associate degree in Texas takes 30 hours more than is required for the degree. It's over 90 hours. I think some. Okay. With universities, it's over 140 hours, yet the average degree is now 120. So part of this is something that is manageable through an advising as part of the institution, but the goal is to help students graduate and graduate with as little debt as possible. And it is often forgotten that a significant number of our students have no debt whatsoever.
Okay, next question. At a four-year university, how many SCH is a reportable certificate? And I think
that is actually in the reporting manual and in the guidelines. But graduate certificates are not included. So I just
in the completion
goal, we're not including graduate certificates.
Okay,
we currently have no questions in the queue, so
I think we were going to discuss to move forward in terms of goal by goal to see if there's any other goal specific. I know we've been talking about all these questions relate to all of the different goals, but I think Ginger did mention we would go through. So if anyone has any specific questions about the completion goal at this point in time, I'm happy to respond.
And let me add to that is we are planning to have a webinar on each specific goal, yes, so we can go into beyond what we do today, can go into a great detail, amount of detail on each goal, and so allow those of you who really want to talk mainly about, say, the completion goal or the debt goal to devote your time to that.
And we will be spending, during each of those individual webinars, we will go into how the numbers were developed and that sort of thing for that individual goal. We just got a couple more questions here.
Okay. Has there been any discussion about specific strategic plans for graduate education, particularly if they differ from the 60 by 30 text plans for undergraduate education?
We have had some discussions of perhaps funding a study on graduate education. In fact, we have a proposal on our desk from the RAND Corporation right now to that end. But as with closing the gaps, we've found that institutions have we don't have to even begin to encourage people to ask for and request new graduate programs. We had no target for doctoral degrees yet. I think the number of doctoral degrees awarded, I think, doubled. So we do not have that. I think it's not included in this plan, but we have discussed the possibility of the emerging research and research institutions having more direct opportunity to apply for PhD programs, with being much more open for everyone else in terms of professional doctoral degrees, such as the DNP, the EDD, et cetera. And
also, the completion goal does include masters this time, which is different from closing the gaps, because there's a lot of masters, there's a lot of interest in having students start even at an entry level in the workforce with a master's degree. So we've actually included masters as part of the completion goal this time.
Oh, okay. Also, it was just pointed out to me that the graduate degrees are, in fact, included in the state goal, the 60 by 30 goal. And we haven't talked explicitly about that. There is a distinction between those I think is worth mentioning, is that the educational attainment, the 60 by 30 goal by the state, is influenced by a wide range of things. I've mentioned to the committee, for example, if the economy of the state is doing extraordinarily well, we tend to import educated people. And in fact, if we didn't have our completion goal, if we weren't hitting our completion goal, it might be that our state, the overall state goal, we might be doing better than we would like. Conversely, if the economy is doing badly and we're losing a lot of graduates to other states, the institutions could just be doing an incredible job, but it may not show up in the state goal. So I'm making that distinction because we've kept making the point to policymakers that the 60% goal is really the entire state's responsibility, and the colleges and universities contribute significantly to that. But if we don't hit that, it won't necessarily be because of the lack of institutions' efforts if we hit our completion goal.
Okay. The next question, how will completions be tracked? Will cohorts be set up?
No. It is the number of completions in an individual year. Just as it was in closing the gaps, we did not look at graduation rates. We did not look at any of that. We looked at the number of students completing.
The next question, are there any particular graduates with certain degrees or certificates that will be needed more than others? And if so, how did you all arrive at that conclusion?
We did not have a target for any type of specific types of degrees being produced. This time we looked at more the targets, the individual targets within the completion goal are set for Hispanics, African Americans, and males, because males of all racial and ethnic groups are falling behind the females.
Yeah. Now, internally, we are restructuring to some extent so that we will be monitoring more closely needs in the workforce, and we will be providing that information to the institutions. Some of the things that we're in closing the gaps, we still have shortfalls, but we have one of the deliverables we got from RAND when we were doing the BAT study was a way to monitor the workforce needs on an ongoing basis following the study. And so we will be doing that much more. We, are already working closely with the Workforce Commission on this. They are monitoring job ads, but as we all know, it's very easy to know what employers need now and 2 or 3 years from now, but it's more difficult to tell 10 years from now. So we're developing this in such a way that we will provide feedback to you, and we do anticipate that we will work, as I said, in a more learning community sense with industry in general going forward, and address that concern in that manner.
Next question. Will community colleges be offering 2 years of free tuition to qualified students, and if so, when will this begin?
Whenever you're ready. Community colleges are free to offer almost free tuition now, but actually I assume that what you're referring to is the plan that has come from the Obama administration that talks about somehow funding 2 years of free tuition. That has yet to get through Congress, and frankly, from what I read, it is not likely to get through Congress. But even if it does, I have no idea when that will be implemented, and that would be a federal program, not a state program.
That's right, and I have not, Rex, you may have, but I have not seen any details in terms of how that would happen. It was a big splash, and I've been looking for details, and there don't seem to be really forthcoming.
No, and I haven't seen anything other than like you said, just the initial announcement about we're going to try this, but no details regarding implementation.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. Why don't we pull up the Marketable Skills goal just to ensure that there aren't additional questions there as we're going through goal by goal. Are there any questions from the field that we have not addressed already related to the Marketable Skills goal?
Okay, and we don't see any there. Oops, hang on, something just came in.
Yep, we have a question. Career services or development on many campuses work with employers and help students develop soft skills needed in the workplace. How do you see their role with this strategic plan?
Well, I mentioned earlier that they play a key role. On some campuses, unfortunately, they don't engage with students until their students are near graduating. We think that needs to happen sooner. I know there are campuses where that isn't the case, and they're engaged from the beginning. I know that on some campuses there are actually career services offices located within the different colleges on campus, but clearly we're falling short in this area, and I think part of it is to help identify for students, to help give them a better idea about what their actual marketable skills are. And I think from a department standpoint, a history department doesn't necessarily think about where their students will be employed beyond being history teachers or going on to graduate school, although I know some do. The University of Utah has done that very well, and they've identified things that employers really like about their graduates, and they've emphasized them. But this is going to take involvement. This isn't a job solely for career services. It's a job for the faculty, the departments to work together on this. And as I said, I know at least some institutions that's already happening. but it's clear that it's not happening to the full extent that it needs to for our students to get the jobs they deserve.
You know, I think it would be useful to departments to the extent that career services or development offices have had these conversations with business and industry or employers, and if they have a list of the kinds of things that skills and knowledge that employers are looking for, if they would just make that available to the departments, then the departments could then begin to think about, you know, in the course of our program, do we teach these things as well? Yeah. And it may very well be things that, as David pointed out, things that the departments have never really thought about, and certainly the students have never really thought about. So, you know, again, it's always important to keep in mind that, you know, the idea here is to have institutions and programs identify to a great extent what they're already doing, but also, most importantly, then to make what they're already doing explicit to students so that then students can make that explicit to employers.
And I think part of this is departments and institutions taking better advantage of what they're required to do by SACs in terms of follow-up with employers, what they're required to do, required by their specialized accrediting bodies. In some cases, I know that that's done in a sort of perfunctory kind of way. Other departments are more serious. I mean, I've been on that end myself, and I know some times we did a good job, other times we just did what we had to do. Also, I'd note in terms of, I know in some cases, career services primarily know about just those employers who come to recruit at their institution. I know that's not always the case, but we need to sort of understand beyond that. Some institutions have many employers come, others have few, but there's students who may have opportunities well beyond people who actually come to campus to recruit. And I think we need to make sure we open that window a little bit to companies that the school itself may not be that familiar with.
Okay, we haven't had any. Oh, Ginger. Yes.
This is Ginger. I would just like to add to the responses because I think this is a wonderful question. And it's a wonderful question because it points out that career services should be part of the process that's identified in this goal and in the targets. So we're asking you to develop a process to identify marketable skills and identify those marketable skills and communicate them to students. And career services should be embedded in this, you know, from start to finish. So I appreciate the question, and I hope that as you develop or as you respond to this goal, that career services will be a big part of what you do.
Okay, then I think let's just move on to our final goal, which is related to student debt. And if anyone has any specific questions about that goal or affiliated targets, please write in, and we'll give you a moment to do that. Okay, not seeing any questions about student debt. We will send out information. We will be having another webinar on each of the individual goals. So if you have goals and targets under those goals. So if you have questions and they're not, they have not been answered today and you want to look at it and think about it some more, we will be sending out information on that to everybody at the same time. And but if you think of them, we just got one. Okay. Okay, this question is, will we consider the student debt that students have from out of state? We actually do not have a way of including any kind of debt from out of state. We can only look at the debt. We will be considering the debt that is reported on the CBM, the financial aid database, from the institution. So we don't have information on the out-of-state debt at all.
Well, thank you all again for tuning in. We really appreciate your time and we appreciate your questions. And in about 6 months, we're going to really appreciate your talent as you help us implement this plan. So again, feel free to email me. This is Ginger with comments on the plan. We're going to share any comments we get with the committee at the May meeting and the June meeting, and we're really hoping to hear from you the strategies that you think will help implement the plan. Hopefully we'll hear from you soon. Thank you.
Someone just wrote, can you see this? Yes, we can. So maybe someone's asked some questions that we didn't see. We thought we were able to see them all.
Candy Harris, did you have a question you wanted to type in?
Or maybe I missed one as we were going through. There were many. I think I saw her name earlier.
We're looking for your question. Could you type it in again, please, Candy?
And Kitty wants to know about student affairs and marketable skills. Anything we could add about that? Oh, and also, should we incorporate them into out-of-class programming?
Yes. Yes. I think part of what people forget is that there are things that students do on campuses that contribute. I had a good friend that actually at the University of Missouri now, but when he worked for ExxonMobil, he said that some of their basic analysis was they could identify students who would be very good in their certain jobs, and they really wanted to hire them, but they also were able to identify people that they thought would probably rise to leadership, and they tended to be students who had the time to participate in various things on campus where they actually would learn about, in some case, hiring and firing, how to manage budgets, how to develop campaigns, how to produce documents, a whole range of things. So those are, in fact, important additions to what how students can acquire marketable skills. I appreciate that question. This is something, institutions need to work together on this. We know that back when we were talking about retention, there was the idea that there are certain offices on campus that tended not to talk to each other and needed to. And so I think this is a case of, I think everybody on campus has something to contribute, and how you structure that locally may differ from school to school, but it is important that the career services, student personnel, faculty, that they all see this as a joint effort to the benefit of the student. Great question. If you need some support on your campus, we'd be glad to encourage folks, and we'll make sure to include student personnel in our discussions in the future, Candy.
Well, thank you again, and please remember that the deadline for comments on this draft is May 29th, and you should please email those comments to me, ginger.gossman@thecb.state.tx.us. But hopefully you have my email readily available to you through the announcement of this webinar. So
I'm also sure she would be glad to receive those well before the date if you have.
Yes.
So don't feel like you have to wait till the end.
Please don't wait till the very end. Thank you again, everyone, and have a great Tuesday.